the Alpha King followed his quiet Omega Maid. What he discovered made him fall hard. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main character. Emily Carter was just like any other Omega in the kingdom, quiet, overlooked, and deemed unimportant. As a maid in the royal palace, her job was to clean, serve, and keep her head down. Her once proud family had fallen into disgrace, and so had she. With no scent to call her own, Emily was never chosen by any alpha, and so, she lived a life in the shadows. She had learned long ago that the best way to survive was to remain invisible. No one cared about the quiet Omega girl in the corner of the palace. But, one day, things would change. Alexander Thornridge, the Alpha King, had noticed her, or so she thought. He was always present in the royal palace, a towering figure with icy blue eyes and a demeanor that made everyone around him freeze. No one dared approach him unless he called for them. Emily had served him for years, cleaning his chambers, tending to his needs, but always staying out of his way. He never paid attention to her, or so she believed. However, the truth was far different. Alexander had noticed Emily long before she realized. He had seen the way she moved, the way her quiet presence seemed to calm the chaos of the palace. But it wasn't just her calmness that intrigued him, it was her hidden strength, the power she kept buried deep inside, a power he could sense but not fully understand. Over the past few weeks, he had been following her, watching her from afar. He had seen how she helped the others, how she kept the peace without ever seeking attention. Every time she entered a room, the space seemed to quiet, her presence like a gentle breeze. But there was more to her than that. He had seen how she interacted with the palace staff, how she healed wounds, not with magic, but with a touch that seemed to ease pain, both physical and emotional. That was when he realized something had to be different about her. But Alexander couldn't understand why she had been hiding it. Why was she so quiet? Why did she seem so content with being invisible? He needed answers. And so, on one fateful evening, he decided to follow her. He knew that by doing so, he would discover something that would change everything. Emily, unaware of his watchful eyes, continued her work in silence. She was used to being unnoticed. But tonight, she felt a strange shift in the air. It was as if something had changed. She couldn't explain it, but for the first time in years, she felt as if she might be seen. And that feeling, though unsettling, gave her a strange sense of hope. Little did she know, the Alpha King was closer than she could have ever imagined. Emily had no idea that tonight would change everything. She had spent years living in the shadows, in the quiet corners of the palace, her existence barely noticed. She was used to it. She had learned to embrace her invisibility. But as she went about her work that evening, a strange sense of unease settled in her chest. The air felt heavier, as if something was about to happen. She couldn't place it, but it was there, lingering like a storm waiting to break. Alexander had been watching her for weeks now, studying her from the shadows. He couldn't explain why, but something about Emily intrigued him. It wasn't just her calm demeanor or her unassuming nature. There was something deeper, something he couldn't put his finger on. He had seen how she interacted with the staff, how she effortlessly brought peace to the chaos around her. He had witnessed the way she seemed to heal, not with magic, but with a gentleness that no one else possessed. Her touch was more than just comforting, it was almost otherworldly. As he followed her quietly through the halls that night, he found himself drawn to her, to the quiet strength that radiated from her, even in the most mundane tasks. Emily walked slowly through the long corridors of the palace, her footsteps echoing softly in the silence. The moonlight filtered through the large windows, casting an ethereal glow across the marble floors. She moved as if in a trance, unaware that she was being followed. Alexander couldn't help but admire her as she went about her duties, her movements fluid, graceful, and deliberate. She was like a shadow, slipping through the palace unnoticed by all but him. He had seen how others treated her, like she was invisible, unimportant, but he knew better. There was something about Emily that set her apart from everyone else. As she reached the far end of the corridor, she stopped in front of a door, hesitating for a moment before pushing it open. Alexander followed, careful to remain unseen. He watched as she entered the small room, where the servants kept their tools and cleaning supplies. The room was dimly lit, and Emily made her way to the far corner, where a simple cot lay against the wall. She sank into the cot, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of the world had suddenly pressed down on her. Alexander's heart clenched. He had never seen her like this before. For the first time, he saw her not as the maid who moved through the palace like a ghost, but as a person, a woman who had carried the burden of invisibility for far too long. He couldn't stay in the shadows anymore. He stepped forward, making his presence known. Emily looked up, startled, her hand instinctively reaching for a nearby broom, as if to defend herself. But Alexander raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." Emily's breath caught in her throat as she stared at him, unsure of what to do. She had never been addressed like this before, especially not by the Alpha King. "Why are you following me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Alexander took a step closer, his gaze softening as he studied her. "I've been watching you," he admitted. "I don't know why, but there's something about you. Something I can't explain." Emily's heart raced, her mind struggling to process what he was saying. She had always been invisible to everyone, even to the powerful Alpha King. She had never imagined he would notice her, let alone follow her. "You've been watching me," she repeated, disbelief lacing her voice. Alexander nodded, stepping closer until he was standing just a few feet away from her. "Yes," he said, his voice low and filled with an intensity that made Emily's pulse quicken. "I don't know what it is about you, but I can't stay away." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine as his words sank in. She had always kept to herself, always been quiet and unobtrusive, never wanting to draw attention. But now, here was the Alpha King, standing before her, revealing something she couldn't quite understand. Alexander extended his hand to her, his eyes locked with hers. "I want to understand you, Emily," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to know who you really are." Emily stared at his hand, unsure of what to do. She had never been touched by someone with such power before. The weight of his presence was overwhelming, but there was a warmth in his eyes that made her hesitate. Slowly, she reached out, her fingers brushing against his. The moment their hands touched, a jolt of energy passed between them. It was subtle at first, like a spark igniting something deep inside her. Alexander's eyes widened in surprise, and Emily could feel the pull between them growing stronger. It was as if the universe had just shifted, and she was now standing at the center of something that was far beyond her comprehension. Emily's heart was racing as she looked at Alexander, his hand still outstretched, waiting for her to make a choice. The touch they had shared, so simple, yet so powerful, left her breathless, as though she had just discovered a secret hidden deep within herself. She had never expected this, never imagined the Alpha King would seek her out, let alone make her feel something so overwhelming. Her mind was a whirl of confusion, fear, and a flicker of hope she had long buried. Alexander, seeing the hesitation in her eyes, took a step back, giving her the space she needed to process the moment. His expression softened, his eyes no longer filled with the cold distance that had once defined him. Instead, there was a warmth there, something Emily had never thought she would see from someone as powerful and untouchable as him. "Emily," he said gently, his voice low but filled with an unspoken promise. "I don't want to rush you. I need to understand you. Who you really are." Emily swallowed, her throat dry, and for the first time, she found her voice. "I'm just a maid," she whispered, her gaze falling to the floor, unwilling to meet his eyes. "I'm nothing special." Alexander's eyes widened in surprise, and he quickly shook his head. "You are more than that, Emily," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "I see something in you. Something that no one else does." Emily shook her head, unable to comprehend his words. "You don't know what you're saying. I'm just an Omega. I've never been anything more." Alexander stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet oddly comforting. You're more than your title, Emily. You have a strength inside of you that you don't even see yet. I can feel it. Emily could hardly believe what she was hearing. She had spent her entire life being dismissed, overlooked, and now the Alpha King himself was standing before her, telling her she was special. The weight of his words was both comforting and terrifying. How could someone like her, someone who had never been chosen by any Alpha, ever be seen as anything more than invisible? As she struggled with her thoughts, Alexander gently placed his hand on her shoulder, the warmth of his touch grounding her. I've been following you for a reason, Emily, he confessed, his voice soft but steady. I couldn't stop thinking about you. I don't know what it is, but there's something about you that calls to me. Emily's breath caught in her throat, and she felt a flutter of something deep inside her, something she couldn't explain. Why, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Alexander hesitated for a moment, his gaze fixed on her with a mixture of determination and vulnerability. Because I believe you have a destiny greater than this. I believe you have something to offer, not just to me, but to this kingdom. And I want to be the one to help you discover it. Emily's heart was pounding in her chest, and for the first time in her life, she felt a spark of something more than just survival. She felt like maybe, just maybe, there was more to her existence than she had ever believed. But doubt lingered in the back of her mind. I'm not like other Omegas, she said quietly. I have no scent, no power. What could I possibly offer? Alexander smiled gently, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite place. You don't need to be like anyone else, Emily. You are exactly who you're supposed to be. The words felt like a balm to her soul, and for the first time in years, Emily felt like she wasn't just a shadow in the background, but someone who mattered. She met his gaze, and in that moment, something inside her shifted. She was scared, unsure of where this path would lead, but she knew one thing for certain, her life would never be the same again. Alexander stepped back, his expression a mix of hope and anticipation. Take your time, he said softly. But know this, I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here when you're ready. Emily nodded slowly, her mind still swirling, but something in her heart told her that this was the beginning of something new, something that could change everything. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it. As Alexander turned to leave, Emily stayed in the room, her hand still tingling where his touch had been. She didn't know what had just happened, but she knew one thing, her life had just been set on a new course, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid to see where it would lead. Emily woke the next morning with a strange sense of anticipation swirling in her chest. The events of the previous night felt like a dream, but the warmth of Alexander's touch, the sincerity in his eyes, it was all too real. She had spent years hiding in plain sight, letting the world pass her by, but now, for the first time, she felt seen. She didn't know what had come over her, but there was something about Alexander, something about the way he looked at her, that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as invisible as she had always believed. She stood in front of the mirror, her fingers tracing the simple maid's uniform she had worn for years. It was the same dress, the same life, but something was different today. She couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a passing moment, but the beginning of something much larger. But doubt lingered. Could she truly step into the world that Alexander seemed to believe she could be a part of? Could she really accept the idea that she was more than just an invisible maid? She shook her head, trying to clear the thoughts that were clouding her mind. No. She couldn't let herself get lost in fantasies. She had been nothing for so long. Who was she to think she could be something more? Yet, as she made her way through the palace halls, she felt a strange pull, as if something inside her was awakening. The quiet, unassuming woman who had spent years cleaning floors and staying out of the way was starting to feel something different stir within her. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Meanwhile, Alexander had not been able to stop thinking about her. The night they had shared that connection, the touch that sent a jolt through his entire being, had shaken him in ways he couldn't explain. He had seen many women in his life, but none like Emily. She wasn't like the others, her quiet strength, her gentleness, it was something that captivated him. He had watched her for weeks, and with each passing day, his curiosity about her had only deepened. There was something undeniably special about Emily, something that no one else seemed to see. But what was it? Why did she have this effect on him? He couldn't understand it, but he knew one thing for certain: he wanted to know her better. And he was determined to make her see that she was more than just a maid. She was more than the life she had been living. As he walked through the palace, his thoughts kept returning to her. He had promised her space, promised her time to figure things out, but the pull he felt towards her was growing stronger by the minute. He couldn't stay away. As he rounded a corner, he saw Emily walking toward him. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the entire world seemed to fade away. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she saw him. She had told herself she would focus on her work, that she wouldn't let herself get distracted, but here he was again, standing in front of her. She felt the same strange connection, the same pull that she had felt the night before. She couldn't explain it, but it was there. Alexander smiled, his expression softer than she had ever seen it. "Emily," he said, his voice low but warm. "How are you this morning?" She hesitated, unsure of how to answer. I'm well, Your Majesty," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander's smile widened. "Good," he said, stepping closer. "I'm glad to hear that." Emily felt a flutter in her chest as he approached. She had never been this close to him before, and the proximity was almost overwhelming. But there was no fear in his gaze, no sense of distance, just a warmth that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she was meant to be here, in this moment. "I've been thinking about our conversation last night," he continued, his voice steady. "And I want you to know that I'm here, Emily. I'm not going anywhere." Emily looked up at him, her heart racing. She didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to being treated this way, especially not by someone as powerful as Alexander. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice shaky. "I've never been treated like this before." Alexander reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "You don't need to say anything. Just know that you're not invisible to me." His words were like a balm to her soul, and for the first time in years, Emily felt like she was standing in the light, no longer hidden in the shadows. She looked up at him, her heart full of uncertainty and hope. "But what about me?" she asked quietly. "What do I have to offer? I'm just a maid, Alexander. Nothing special." Alexander's eyes softened as he held her gaze. "You are more than that," he said firmly. "You are everything I've been searching for, even if you don't see it yet." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that she was something more than just a maid, but it was hard. She had spent so long convincing herself that she didn't matter. "I'm not sure I can be what you want me to be," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander stepped closer, his hand still holding hers. "I don't want you to be anything other than yourself," he said gently. "That's all I need." Emily's heart swelled with emotion, and for the first time in her life, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could be more. Maybe she wasn't just an invisible maid after all. Emily stood there, her hand still resting in Alexander's, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she mattered. His words, so sincere and full of warmth, had chipped away at the walls she had spent years building around herself. The uncertainty that had clouded her mind for so long began to fade, replaced by something new, something that she couldn't quite put into words. For the first time, she felt seen. The Alpha King, the most powerful man in the kingdom, was standing before her, not as a ruler but as someone who genuinely wanted to know her, to understand her. "You don't have to be anything you're not," Alexander said, his voice steady and filled with an intensity that made Emily's heart race. "You don't have to hide anymore." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had never been given the freedom to be herself before. Her life had been nothing but service, obedience, and silence. She had always lived in the shadows, hidden from view, convinced that she was nothing more than a maid, unworthy of attention or love. But now, standing before Alexander, she was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was wrong. "I don't know how to be anything else," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. "I've spent so many years hiding. I don't even know who I am anymore." Alexander smiled softly, his thumb brushing gently over her hand. "You don't have to figure it all out right now," he said. "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. But I want you to know that you are important, Emily. You matter." His words set a rush of warmth through her, and for the first time in years, she felt like the weight she had carried for so long was slowly lifting. Emily looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of disbelief and hope. "I don't know what to do with all of this," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I've always been invisible. I don't know how to be seen." Alexander stepped closer, his presence gentle but firm. "You don't have to do anything, Emily. Just be yourself. That's all I need from you." His gaze softened as he looked at her, and for the first time, Emily saw a vulnerability in his eyes that she hadn't expected. He wasn't just the powerful Alpha King. He was a man, with his own hopes, fears, and desires. And in that moment, she realized that he wasn't just offering her his protection. He was offering her something more. Something that went beyond power or status. He was offering her a chance to be seen, to be understood. "I don't know what the future holds," she said quietly, her voice steadying with each word. "But I want to try. I want to see where this goes." Alexander's eyes brightened with a mixture of relief and joy. "You don't have to do this alone," he said, his voice soft but full of meaning. "I'll be with you every step of the way." Emily nodded, a sense of determination settling in her chest. She had spent so long hiding, so long convinced that she was nothing more than a maid. But now, standing in front of Alexander, she knew that she had the power to change her own destiny. The power to be more than what she had always believed. Alexander's hand gently cupped her cheek, and for the first time, she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into his touch, finding comfort in the warmth that radiated from him. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for seeing me." Alexander's smile was gentle, his gaze unwavering. "You're welcome, Emily. I've always seen you. I just had to find the courage to let you see yourself." As the words hung in the air between them, Emily felt something shift within her. It wasn't just a moment of understanding between two people. It was the beginning of something new, something that had the potential to change everything. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in her life, she was ready to face it. Ready to be seen, not just as a maid, but as herself. And with Alexander by her side, she felt like anything was possible. As the days passed, Emily felt a growing sense of change within her. The palace, once a place of shadows and silence, now seemed full of possibilities. She had started to notice little things, like the way the sunlight filtered through the windows in the morning, casting golden patterns on the stone floors, or how the soft murmur of the palace staff didn't feel as overwhelming anymore. It was as if she was beginning to hear and see the world around her in a new light. And it wasn't just the world outside that had changed. It was her. Alexander's words, his belief in her, had opened something within Emily. She had started to believe that she could be more than just the invisible maid she had always been. She could be seen. She could be heard. And, perhaps most importantly, she could matter. The connection between her and Alexander had grown since that night. They had shared quiet moments, simple conversations, and for the first time, Emily had felt truly understood. He had shown her that there was more to her than the labels that had been placed on her. He had seen her, not just as an Omega, but as a person, as someone with her own strength, her own value. Alexander, too, had found himself drawn deeper into Emily's world. The quiet strength she carried, the way she navigated the palace with grace and kindness, had captivated him in ways he hadn't expected. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. For the first time in years, he found himself looking beyond the role of Alpha King, beyond the duties and responsibilities that had once consumed him, and seeing a woman who had the power to change everything. But despite their growing connection, Emily still felt the weight of doubt pulling at her. She had never been a part of the world that Alexander inhabited, and the thought of stepping into that world filled her with uncertainty. She wasn't sure she could truly belong there. As much as Alexander made her feel valued, there was a part of her that wondered if she could ever be worthy of the life he led. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens, Emily hesitated. The air was cool, the scent of jasmine heavy in the evening breeze, but there was a tension in her that she couldn't shake. Alexander noticed it immediately. "What's on your mind?" he asked gently, his voice soft but filled with concern. Emily looked up at him, her heart pounding. "I don't know if I can be what you want me to be," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't belong in your world, Alexander. I don't know if I can ever be enough." Alexander stopped walking, turning to face her. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her face. "Emily, listen to me," he said, his voice steady but filled with an intensity that made her heart race. "You are more than enough. You always have been. You don't have to change for me, for anyone. You just have to be you. That's all I've ever wanted." Emily felt the sincerity in his words, but the doubt still lingered. "But what if I'm not strong enough? What if I don't have what it takes?" Alexander smiled softly, his eyes filled with understanding. "You are stronger than you think," he said. "I've seen it in you. Every day, I see it in the way you carry yourself, the way you care for others, the way you've cared for me. You don't have to be anyone else, Emily. You're already everything I need." His words, gentle and full of conviction, struck a chord deep within her. Emily closed her eyes, letting the warmth of his touch and his words wash over her. For the first time, she truly believed him. She wasn't just an Omega. She wasn't just a maid. She was someone with her own strength, her own worth. She could be more. She could be everything. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. Alexander leaned in, brushing a gentle kiss against her forehead. "You don't have to thank me," he said quietly. "You've always been enough. You just needed to see it yourself." As they stood there in the quiet of the palace gardens, Emily felt a sense of peace settle over her. For the first time, she was ready to step into the world she had always thought was out of reach. She was ready to embrace the future, to embrace the person she had always been meant to be. And with Alexander by her side, she knew that nothing was impossible. She had found her place. She had found her worth. As days turned into weeks, Emily's transformation became more evident to those around her. Her once hesitant steps, full of doubt and fear, had become more assured, her shoulders squared with newfound confidence. The quiet maid who had spent her life hidden in the background was now stepping forward into the light, no longer willing to fade into the shadows. And Alexander, ever by her side, had seen the change firsthand. He had watched her grow, not just in the way she held herself, but in the way she began to see herself differently. He had believed in her from the start, but it was something else to see her start to believe in herself. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens again, Emily stopped beside a fountain, the gentle sound of the water flowing soothing her nerves. She had always loved this spot, the peaceful, quiet place that allowed her to think. But today, it felt different. Today, she wasn't just standing there as an invisible servant, but as a person who had a place in this world. Alexander, sensing her pause, stood beside her. "You've come a long way," he said, his voice soft but filled with pride. Emily looked up at him, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "I never thought I would be here," she confessed. "I spent so much of my life believing I didn't belong, that I was nothing more than a maid, a servant. But now, I feel like I have a purpose." Alexander smiled, his eyes warm with affection. "You've always had a purpose, Emily," he said, taking her hand in his. "You just needed to see it." The words settled into her heart, and for a moment, she felt a peace she had never known. It was as if everything that had once been so unclear now seemed within reach. "But what about you?" Emily asked, her voice soft. "What do you see in me?" Alexander paused, his expression turning serious. "I see strength," he said, his voice steady. "I see someone who has been through more than anyone should ever have to endure, yet you still stand strong. You faced rejection, isolation, and pain, and yet, you have this incredible capacity to heal, to care for others. I see someone who is more than enough." Emily's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. She had never heard anyone speak to her like this. She had never believed that she could be enough, that she could be someone worth noticing. But Alexander had always believed in her. He had always seen something in her that she couldn't see in herself. "I never thought I could be what you see in me," Emily whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I've spent so long convincing myself that I was invisible, that I didn't matter." Alexander lifted her chin gently, his eyes locking with hers. "You matter more than you." "No," he said, his voice filled with an intensity that made her heart race. "You've always mattered. And I'm not just talking about here, in this palace. I'm talking about the world. You have the power to change it, Emily. You have the power to change everything." Emily looked at him, feeling the weight of his words settle into her soul. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't just living to survive. She wasn't just existing in the background, doing what was expected of her. She was living with purpose, with meaning. And for the first time, she was ready to embrace it. She squeezed Alexander's hand, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I don't know what the future holds," she said softly, "but I'm ready to find out." Alexander smiled back, his heart swelling with pride. "Whatever happens, I'll be here with you, every step of the way." As the sun set behind the palace, casting a golden glow over the gardens, Emily stood tall, no longer the quiet maid she had once been, but a woman with a future she was ready to shape. With Alexander by her side, she knew that nothing could stop her now. She had found her strength, her place, and her purpose. And for the first time in her life, she felt truly free. The days that followed were filled with a quiet anticipation that settled over the palace like a soft blanket. Emily could feel the shift in the air, the weight of something new blooming within her. It wasn't just the way she walked through the halls anymore, it was the way she held herself, the way she faced the world around her with a quiet strength that had always been there, hidden beneath the surface. Alexander had given her the confidence to stand tall, to step out of the shadows and into the light. And with every passing day, she found herself more willing to embrace the future that had once seemed so far out of reach. She spent more time with him, learning about his world, his responsibilities, and his struggles. She listened as he shared his thoughts, his dreams, and his hopes for the future, and with each word, she felt herself grow closer to him, to the man he was behind the crown. It wasn't just the power he wielded that captivated her, though that was undeniable. It was the kindness in his eyes, the way he treated everyone around him with respect, no matter their station. And it was his unwavering belief in her, even when she struggled to believe in herself. But despite the warmth and comfort that Alexander brought into her life, there were moments when Emily found herself filled with uncertainty. She had always been content to live in the background, to remain unseen, and now, as the spotlight shifted toward her, she wasn't sure she could handle the attention. What if she wasn't ready? What if she failed him? One evening, after a long day spent with Alexander, Emily found herself wandering the palace gardens, seeking solace in the stillness of the night. The moon hung high above, casting a soft glow on the flowers below. The gentle rustle of leaves in the wind was the only sound that accompanied her as she walked slowly, lost in her thoughts. She had always loved this place, the tranquility it offered, the way it made her feel like she could breathe freely, away from the weight of her responsibilities. But tonight, the quiet only seemed to amplify the doubts swirling in her mind. "What's troubling you?" Alexander's voice broke through the silence, and Emily turned to find him standing a few feet away, his gaze gentle but concerned. She hadn't realized he had followed her. She smiled softly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just thinking," she replied, her voice quiet. "I'm not sure I'm ready for all of this, Alexander." He stepped closer, his presence warm and comforting as he reached out to take her hand. "You don't have to be ready right now," he said softly. "You're not alone in this. I'm here with you, every step of the way." Emily's heart swelled at his words, but the doubt still lingered. "But what if I mess up?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What if I'm not strong enough?" Alexander gently cupped her face in his hands, his touch tender. "You are stronger than you know, Emily. I've seen it in you, time and time again. You have a strength that's been inside you all along. You just needed someone to help you see it." Her eyes met his, and for the first time in a long while, Emily allowed herself to believe in the truth of his words. The fear, the self-doubt, began to dissipate, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. She wasn't alone. She didn't have to face this new world by herself. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "I don't know what I would do without you." Alexander smiled, his eyes full of affection. "You'll never have to find out," he said, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "I'll always be here, Emily. You're not alone." Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that she was worthy of love, that she had the strength to face whatever came next. With Alexander by her side, she knew she could handle anything. She wasn't just a maid, a servant, a shadow in the background. She was Emily, and that was enough. And as they stood there, hand in hand, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the gardens, she knew that together, they could face the future. Whatever it held, they would face it together. As the weeks passed, Emily settled into a new rhythm within the palace. The doubt that had once clouded her every step began to fade, replaced by a quiet certainty. She no longer moved through the halls as a shadow, hiding from the world, but as someone who was part of it. The palace, once a place of distant royalty and cold stone walls, now felt like home. And at the center of this transformation was Alexander, who had never wavered in his belief in her. He had shown her a future she hadn't dared to imagine, a future where she was not defined by her past or by the labels society had placed on her. Instead, she was Emily, a woman with purpose, with strength, with love. Their bond deepened with each passing day. They shared quiet moments in the gardens, long conversations under the stars, and, most importantly, they shared a mutual understanding that transcended words. Alexander's presence in her life was no longer just a source of support, it was the foundation upon which she was building her new self. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and lavender, Alexander pulled Emily aside after a royal gathering. The sounds of music and conversation filled the air, but in that moment, it felt like the two of them were in a world all their own. "Emily," he said softly, his voice laced with an emotion she hadn't heard before. She turned to face him, her heart beating a little faster. "I've been thinking about how far we've come. About everything we've shared." She smiled gently, her hand finding his. "We've come a long way," she agreed, her voice steady, yet full of emotion. Alexander's gaze softened as he held her hand. "I never expected this," he said quietly, his thumb brushing over her skin. "I never expected to find someone like you. You've shown me so much more than I could have imagined. I've seen the strength in you, the kindness, the heart that refuses to be hidden. And for that, I'm grateful." Emily's chest tightened as she looked up at him, her heart swelling with affection. She had never imagined a life like this, where she was valued for who she was, not just what she did. "You've helped me see that I'm more than what I thought I was," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You've shown me that I can be something more. That I can be someone worth loving." Alexander stepped closer, his hand cupping her face as he looked into her eyes. "You've always been someone worth loving, Emily. You just needed to see it yourself. I've always known it." The tenderness in his words made her heart skip a beat. It wasn't just his love for her that had changed her, it was the way he had made her believe in herself. The way he had helped her discover the strength and worth she had buried for so long. "And you," she said, her voice soft but steady, "have helped me understand what it means to truly live. To be free. To be myself." Alexander's smile widened, and he leaned in, brushing a kiss against her forehead. "I promise you, Emily," he said quietly, "I will always be here. No matter what. You are not alone in this, not anymore." The weight of his words settled into her heart, and for the first time, Emily truly believed them. She wasn't alone. She had found a place in the world, and it was by his side. As they stood there, surrounded by the beauty of the palace gardens, Emily knew that her life had changed forever. She wasn't the quiet maid who had hidden in the shadows. She was a woman who had found her strength, her voice, and her purpose. And with Alexander, the future was no longer something to fear, it was something to embrace. They didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but together, they knew they could face them. Together, they were unstoppable.